I just heard this guy, Will, who wrote Unreasonable Hospitality. And he talked about how that not everybody likes the tasting menu in every piece of food, but they would never ask for anything different because it's the #1 rated restaurant in the world. And he said, let's always have extra food and we can customize the tasting menu. Just ask people if there's anything they don't like. And nobody said there was anything they didn't like because they're just so happy to be at the restaurant. So Will one day walks up to a table and goes, I don't like shellfish and I definitely don't like oysters. And he goes, is there anything that you guys don't like, especially anything on this tasting menu? And they named a few things and then they customized the meal, made it more special experience. See, he led with, here's what I don't like, but if he didn't lead with that, they didn't have permission because they're trying to pretend to be perfect. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but what are the ways that are going to work best for you? That's the question. And, so you get to say, I don't want it to be salesy. Great. It doesn't have to be. I don't want it to be this. Great. Go ahead and list what you don't want it to be. That's just as valuable as you listing what you want it to be. And make that list, because this gets to be an extension of who you are, not anyone else. Just think about how you want to communicate. Like, I love when a client interviews me. They just do so much of the talking for me. I'm answering the questions. That is awfully nice. I like to have one other person that I can do videos with that we can just play off of each other. We're letting people eavesdrop in on a conversation. When I'm the interviewer and then someone else's, it's their expertise, I hate that. I like talking. I like being able, so you've just got to figure out what your format's going to be. And you already know there's certain questions you're answering all the time, over and over. Those could be handled through short videos. Those could be handled through autoresponder emails. Those could be handled by a consumer awareness guide or a white paper. Those could be handled by a short book. Those could be handled by a number of things. You just have to figure it out. And one of the best ways to figure it out, I would get Joey Coleman's book, Never Lose a Customer Again, because it talks about the client journey. And if you're going to double your income in the next 3 years, what it's going to be is how can you spend half the time and be twice effective with your customers so that you're spending time in the moments that matter most to you and them. Not in the time where you're being redundant, not in the time where you have to answer that same thing over and over, but in the time where they're really sharing and opening up to you because you're a trusted person in their life and you get to have a unique experience each person you talk with. So you're going to build more authority and expertise when you have an IP DNA you figured out and a way to educate and support while you're asleep. Like, this is the way I look at content. When you get my books, it's my best foot forward. Money Unmasked right now is my best writing. It looks good. It's designed well. I would hand it to any person I met and be like, this is me, and it's the best that I am. Now, what if someone saw me? Like, I had my buddy, I landed once on the middle of the comedy tour. My buddy Michael McAllowitz, he wrote Profit First. He was behind me, tapped me on the shoulder, and I just looked at him, and I was like he thought I'd be excited. He thought I might give him a hug. It was like midnight. It felt like 3 a.m. He saw the worst version of me. Fortunately, he's seen the best version of me in my books, right? But in that moment, I didn't have the energy. So when you capture your best moments on camera, on audio, or in writing, you have a way for people to learn about you when they're not around in the best way that you're doing it. And the best news is, if it's not what you like now, you can evolve and redo it. You can improve it. Wealth Factory has a bunch of my old content that I'm going to redo based upon what I've learned over the last 10 years, and even from the sound and the aesthetic and the whole experience that I want to do versus, the old camera angles and the, fumbling through because I'm more articulate now. I did a presentation today for 44 minutes. My partner said it might have been the most clear and articulate I've ever been because I'm putting in the reps, which means that could replace other videos. So this is done is better than perfect, but the key is, what is your flow? What is the things that, of these things you love to do with connecting and improving and helping and how, and implementing, what can be done in a one-to-many format that's consistent with the same things that make you so special one-on-one? And again, I'm going to repeat it because it's worth repeating. So you get to be twice as effective in half the time. So you're doing the things that you don't get bored with or that you feel redundant about. And that's your IP DNA. Where do you get your ideas? How do you articulate the ideas? What are the best ways for your customers to receive the ideas that will then have you perceived as an expert and authority in a way that's consistent with how you want to create? Whether that's on your own, whether that's with someone else, whether that's, interviews, whether that's presentations, whether that's writing outlines, whether that's doing books. There's so many different ways to have it happen. It's just a matter of which ones are going to speak to you. And then worry about compliance second. If we have money, time, ability, or compliance at the forefront of our mind, we never are creative because we're always with this cloud and this heaviness. I want you to get a place where there's a void. Where do you just feel like there's a blank piece of paper that you get to create however you want, regardless of look, I've heard interviews with Joe Rogan where he's like, hey, I didn't think this was going to be this big. I just enjoyed doing it. And he's done it consistently for the longest time and has improved his skill set to become the best in the world. But the first episodes, I talked to Jordan Harbinger, right? He has a huge podcast. He's like, I used to just do it. I didn't know anyone was listening. He says, but over time, I started learning how to say less ums and ahs and have better spacing because it was something that he loved to do. It's part of his IP DNA. He talked me out of doing a podcast, and I'm kind of glad he did because I don't know if it would have been the one that I wanted to do. It would have been the one that everybody else wanted me to do. So this is the conversation at hand of how you do what you do best and do more of it, and then do less of these things that you don't like doing or that you get bored with or that feels redundant. And that's the game. A little bit more of this, a little bit less of that. So it's not taking more of your time, it's just reallocating it. Just like people rebalance a portfolio or have an asset allocation. You're gonna have your asset allocation of you as the asset. How much time is one-to-one? How much time is one-to-many? And how much can those two things go hand in glove, hand in hand, so that you're better because of them working in synergy? I don't know that I've really talked about time allocation as an asset allocation, but there's even times of day that are better asset allocation of time. I write better in the morning. Like if I had to write right after this meeting, I don't know how I would do it. That I'm usually a little bit more, I can have tons of energy meeting with someone at this time of day, but less energy when I'm typing. I have more energy in the mornings for those types of things. I got too drunk in Vegas on Saturday, and when I was flying on Friday night, when I flew Saturday, I couldn't write a thing because I was tired. And you know, that's I think how a lot of people feel when they're doing things they don't want to do. They feel hungover because it feels like it's forced and it's frustrating and it's effort. The other thing is if you could suspend any concern about how it would be received. You might have a little imposter syndrome with the new format. But all you have to do is refine it and remember the mantra, done is better than perfect, progress over perfection. Done is better than perfect, progress over perfection. What I figured out, Dan Sullivan taught me I'm an 80%er. I want to get it 80% of the way done, then I want to hand it off for the other 20%. If I have to get it 100%, it takes so much more time and energy for that last 20%. So that's where you can get into co-creation and collaboration. That's why we have editors. That's why we have, you know, a number of people that can support, you know, team members. But like whether it's video editing, whether it's writing editing, whether, you know, like you can have things be improved by the editor so that you just do your best and then they can cut out the parts that didn't work out or that you stumbled or made a mistake. It's not a big deal because you know, you can just start creating. Candidly, it came from a couple places when I got started. Number one, my ego. I wanted to be more important than I was, and I knew that if I had written something, that was cool and that would be perceived as cool. So I started with just a consumer awareness guide being like, what are some things I know other people don't? 5 ways to improve your finances when the economy's tough. I wrote, what are the 5 things nobody else was talking about? 7 ways to recover cash. These were the precursors, you know, that helped me out. So I didn't have to have a full book. It was just a Word document, and then I could improve those. Now, eventually we designed them and put into PDFs, but that was a start. But it really was, I wanted to be cool. And then it was, well, look, I could actually impact people more if they could read something before we talked or read something after we talked so that they were more likely to do business and they're more likely to understand what they're doing. Because I have this really deep belief, if I could empower someone and they didn't need me, that was the best case scenario because they would tell other people about it and there was plenty of people that needed to be helped. But I grew up learning, well, in finance, you want to make them reliant on you. I'm like, well, then you have no freedom because they're calling you about everything and they feel trapped and they're blaming you for everything, but you get no credit for anything. So I wanted to build them up as their greatest asset. So I started thinking about the tools that would kind of help me get there. But again, I wanted to be cool. I thought it was cool to have a book. I thought I'd be more important. My ego fed into that. And when I was all ego, it took forever to get it done. It wasn't really until my business partner died and I really spent some time at home with my family and asked, what do I really want? And I want to be able to have a life that has depth and harmony, meaning I'm intentionally living and I'm creating a life that isn't necessarily balanced, but it's but it's got depth. So when I'm sitting down with my family, I'm with my family, not my thoughts wandering to my business. Or if I'm with my business, I'm not wandering my thoughts with my family and always feeling guilt and shame and going back and forth and never quite being powerful. And the second thing is, so that's the depth side, but the harmony side is living with intention, saying, how do I want to design my life? And what I knew is I got excited about sharing these concepts in the book because the book became part of who I was, like an artistic expression. And it became something that I fell in love with, that process and the challenges and the learning and getting excited about holding it in my hands and seeing people that had read it and the relationships that it built. So instead of looking at a book as like a business card that people are like, oh, look at this is something Garrett wrote, whoever thought he would write a book and prove something to myself, it became something where I was like digging in and learning more and asking new questions and having this whole purpose to my day of being like, man, this is fun. Like coming up with a title, super excited, wanting to call people, write certain chapters or come up with the title chapters and be like, oh my God, this is awesome. What are all the different ideas and thoughts? And then hiring researchers. And so what happened is it allowed me to grow as a human being. And the book was an extension of that growth, where if that book didn't exist, it wouldn't have pulled that content out of me because I just would have been in the rut of doing what I always did that got the results that I already gotten. And what happened with that book is I started meeting really fascinating, amazing people that changed my quality of life, that I had new conversations with, that challenged some of the things that I said in the book, that created healthy debate, that helped them flip a switch and have a different mindset that they were forever grateful for, and inviting me along into the adventures they had in this life. And before a book, I didn't quite have that. I was very regional and local, and I had like clients that liked what I did, but it became very robotic for me with clients before the book. And what the book did was, if someone read that, we could go deeper faster. And we could explore the ideas that they didn't quite understand because they came informed with better questions. See, because there's questions you're always being asked. But there's a lot of questions people don't even know how to ask or what to ask till they get deep enough in. And the way that the business is designed is by the time that happens, we're already onto another transaction because we're rewarded so much for new transactions that it's hard to continue to serve the people who've already transacted. You're at the richest part of the relationship and now you're moving on. Where if you have this content, you continually to inform them in a way that they become a more valuable asset in the relationship for their finances and to you, because now they know what to ask. Now they know how to show up. Have you ever met with someone that doesn't even know what to ask and they're so lost that they have a hard time talking? Right? You're helping overcome that because they didn't want to do things wrong. They don't want to feel guilty for what they've done. There's all this, we have someone that always said people would much rather talk about sex than money. And, we're here talking about money and they always feel like it should be bigger and they should have more and they are embarrassed of their mistakes. And you know what? When I led with vulnerability in my books and talked about my mistakes and the mishaps, it's like, oh, wait, he's human too. And then that gave them permission to open up. I just heard this guy, Will, who wrote Unreasonable Hospitality. And he talked about how that not everybody likes the tasting menu in every piece of food, but they would never ask for anything different because it's the #1 rated restaurant in the world. And he said, let's always have extra food and we can customize the tasting menu. Just ask people if there's anything they don't like. And nobody said there was anything they didn't like because they're just so happy to be at the restaurant. So Will one day walks up to a table and goes, I don't like shellfish and I definitely don't like oysters. And he goes, is there anything that you guys don't like, especially anything on this tasting menu? And they named a few things, and then they customized the meal, made it more special experience. See, he led with, here's what I don't like, but if he didn't lead with that, they didn't have permission because they're trying to pretend to be perfect. And the pressure of trying to do that one-on-one in a short period of time is heavy, where if they're reading a book at their own time or watching a video at their own time, it allows you to condense and get to the more special part of the one-on-one meeting. Killing Sacred Cows was that book, but I'm here to tell you, I think Money Unmasked will be much more magical because it's more heartfelt and it deals directly with them in their money personas, which you as an advisor knowing the money personas shows you where their pitfalls and what helps them with prosperity the most. So you know how to talk and speak a language that will be more consistent with who they are. And for them, they, like in this book, there's a lot of like what I would call damaging admissions. Like I'm talking about mistakes, I'm talking about vulnerabilities, I'm talking about difficult times, because everybody has that at some point with money, whether they feel inadequate around it or whether they feel like they want it too much or they feel guilty for having, there's all this kind of stuff that's out there that I have a friend, Michael. He always talks about there's what people can share with you, there's what people will share with you, And there's what people can't even share with you because they don't even know how to say it, right? It's like buried in the basement. And if you can lead with vulnerability, people can start sharing things with you that they would have never had the courage to share before. And I had consultants early on in my career, they're like, you want to act like you've never made a mistake and you want to inspire so much confidence in them because you got it all figured out. And I'm like, so inspire confidence in them through falsehood, through, and by the way, part of what made me a really good advisor was my mistakes and being over leveraged in real estate and not fully understanding the value of cash value and taking that out when it would have been fine just staying where it was. And so those stories become the common ground because I feel like a lot of people that are willing to share their scars are bonded forever. People that only share their successes fabricate their life and none of it's really true, and it limits your chance of growing and getting further along. Well, imagine if they share something with you they've never shared with anyone before. They shared a part of themselves because they trusted you enough, and your job is to see and hear them, and they can see and hear you if you're creating content for them when you're not around. And that gives you more time to listen and ask questions and less time explaining. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And if you're enjoying these videos, well, there's good news. More where that came from, so go ahead and click through and watch the next video now.